Welcome back inside the paint. I want to answer that question that Ira posed before the break coming up in a bit, but you guys have asked some great questions in the chat, so I want to get to them. And one of the ones that I think we get a lot, it's some variation of, do we need a big man? And it's Mo Bamba's one that's been mentioned in the chat. I know Big O mentioned Christian Wood before the crossover. And if you guys have listened to us before, there's been a constant tug of war between Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley. And this has gone on for years now. And Eric Spoelstra has won. And it's not changing. Eric Spoelstra wants to play switch everything. He wants to be able to have, and maybe you're a little bit smaller inside in that case with a PJ Tucker. But if you say Mo Bamba to me, I would ask this. Can Mo Bamba guard Trae Young 90 feet from the basket and guard him all the way up the floor? Because that's the type of thing that Eric Spoelstra covets in this lineup. And Bam Adebayo, the ability to switch 1 through 5, have Bam Adebayo go out and make Steph Curry's life miserable when he gets switched onto him, make Trae Young's life miserable. That's the type of thing that Eric Spoelstra covets. So, like, when we get posed these questions about guys like Miles Turner, Christian Wood, Mo Bamba, go down the list of these bigger players, the issue that you're running into, it's not just can this player shoot a three and stretch the floor offensively. There is the defensive element to this that PJ Tucker brought, that Jay Crowder, to a lesser extent, I think, brought. Like, I don't know that you necessarily trusted Jay Crowder to guard somebody 90 feet away from the basket, but if you got switched off onto somebody, you were okay with that. That's the type of four that Eric Spoelstra loves with this core. And I can't see that changing. Not with a team that, based on its defense and its switchability, was able to get to the NBA Finals when I think there's a more pressing need elsewhere.
And that's the thing. So, again, even if I take the name Christian Wood out, and by the way, that's a good name, and I agree, Big O, for this reason. A lot of people are mentioning the Rockets at the top of the draft taking a power forward. And if they do, and the way they're set up already, and they already have young bigs in their pipeline, that Christian Wood could shake free. So it will be interesting. We know the Heat have been linked before. That's not breaking any news here. But again, if you're even talking about big, and we always go back to, and I'm sure there's some in the chat room there, because I know there's always in the Ask Ira mailbag, what about Omer Yurtseven and Bam Adebayo? And Clay, that's the same thing, of course, also. You're talking about a limited mobility big. Even with Dwayne Dedmon, they played him some minutes, and obviously he wasn't switch everything, but they were very limited minutes, no more than probably 12 minutes a game, just a little bit different look when you were going big against other teams. That's why a name I come back to, I don't think he is as defensively as versatile, but I think he could be a wing and a big, and that's John Collins, who can play on the perimeter offensively. And again, we can't pigeonhole players into what they can't do until they come to the Heat, because the Heat get something out of it. Look, Clay, we don't know. If Bam Adebayo went to any other team, that he wouldn't have been the same player he was under John Calipari at Kentucky. Don't ever shoot the ball, just block shots and chase rebounds. And maybe he wouldn't have unlocked this. Eric Spoelstra has unlocked a lot from players we didn't think was possible before. Helped make some of those players trade chips. So I think if you get someone who you could at least view as a 3-4, which Jay Crowder was, which PJ Tucker is, which Trevor Ariza was, I think you can make that work. But to go twin tower or big, it would seem out of character unless Eric Spoelstra sits down in the offseason and goes, crap, this just didn't work. And this won't work against Giannis and Brook Lopez. And this won't work if Robert Williams becomes a full-time starter in Boston and gets past the injuries. So you could look at it that way also. I agree with you, though. He wants his versatility. And when I was talking to Adam Simon about the draft, and I mistakenly asked the question, okay, let's go through the positions. Is this a good center draft? Is this a good pass? And he goes, positionless. I'm not looking to draft a guy who's just a 4, who's just a 3. I'm saying, is he a 2-3? Is he a 3-4? Point guard's a little different. You can make an argument center's a little bit different. So I think when you're talking the 4, power forward from the Heat, it has to be a 4 something, a 4-5, a 3-4, something like that. So if you're going to, and that's the problem with Omer Yurtseven. He's a 5, right?
Yeah.
He ain't in no way a 4 in this NBA to go out and guard, like you mentioned, a Jay Crowder or a John Collins or these more versatile 4 type of players. So I think that factors into it also. And it has to be a guy who at least can be a 4 on the defensive end as well. I know you can stretch Mo Bamba, but can he guard athleticism on the perimeter? So yeah, I think that's where the Christian Wood stuff stops. And that's the push-pull with Omer Yurtseven, which is why I think for Omer Yurtseven to get minutes next season, Dwayne Dedmon can't be on the roster.
Or Omer Yurtseven has to be in Utah or somewhere else. So, which will bring us back to that discussion. But just to kind of like put the capper on that point, you also have to ask yourself this. Can the player who you would be getting to take on that role be better than PJ Tucker for what you would have to pay PJ Tucker in order to bring him back? And I think we're both on the same page that we're pretty sure he's going to ditch that partial guarantee and opt out. I would think that. I would
just
think
to get
he would
years.
want
Just to get years. He has about a $7.3 million contract he can pick up. You're always allowed a 10% raise in the NBA, so he can just get a little bit more. He can get multiple years, which at 37 is a big thing. So I agree. But I think what Big O said in our crosstalk before we started our Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show is valid. You need someone to help carve up some of PJ Tucker's minutes. That he was, whether he was on fumes at the end, whether it was just an injury, whether it was the calf, whether it was the knee. You need one more that you're comfortable with in the power rotation who's versatile. Again, Dwayne Dedmon, Pat Riley said Dwayne Dedmon had a very good season for what he is. Right. Maybe you need something a little more versatile. Again, John Collins can be a 4-5. Yes, he's undersized the 5, and I get that. Christian Wood is a 4-5. I can get that also. You might be able to get more defensive range out of him. But I think we need PJ Tucker's helper. The problem is here is if the Heat are a capped out team, which they most likely will be, they want to be somewhat leery of the tax if they can be, and they want to bring back Caleb Martin. So to me, either Caleb Martin is your backup 3-4, hell, he's a 2-3-4, or else you probably might risk, are you willing to risk losing Caleb Martin to instead use your mid-level exception, whether it's the taxpayer 6.4, they probably can go to the full mid-level 10.3. Would you rather use that on your power forward if it means at the cost of losing Caleb Martin?
And this is where I'm looking at this thing, and this brings us back to the Donovan Mitchell discussion, the whale discussion, all that. To me, Ira, I think the Heat will swing big. I know the Heat will swing big because Pat Riley always swings big. He always has a plan A, B, C, D, all the way down to like alpha and omega. But I think the thing in this case is it's hard to envision because of their contract situation on the books, them making more than one big move and bringing in more than one big money player. And so to me, it's you almost have to make a choice. Like if you're talking about a John Collins, somebody who's going to be, pricey. Christian Wood, maybe not quite as much as you mentioned, Houston looking to move on. Jeremy Grant's a name, but like, what is more important to this team? Upgrading the 4 over PJ Tucker? Because I don't think you can make a move like that financially and circle back and bring back PJ Tucker, because then you'd be completely neglecting the scoring problem that you have on this team. So what's better? Upgrading PJ Tucker and bringing in one of those players, or finding a way to bring back PJ and going with a big, or going back and getting that score that you desperately need. And you have to make sure to look at this from a perspective of how does Eric Spoelstra run this team? It's not, look, like I said, Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra have had this tug of war when it comes to big men, and Eric Spoelstra has won. That ain't changing. So, you can say, oh, they need to philosophically change what they do. Fine, that's a different discussion, but that ain't happening. So let's stick with the in the moment, what could potentially happen. Ira,
it's funny, but when you're talking about whale hunting and big game hunting and mega moves, which we've spoken about now through 2 segments of our Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show, there's also the mega trade that might not involve any singular individual star. And Clay, I'm going to take you back to the 2005 offseason when the Heat had a bunch of ancillary needs around the core of Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal. And remember what Pat Riley did when he went out and he made that trade. Remember the Grizzlies trade? And he went out and he got Antoine Walker. Yep. We need a scorer. We need a 3-point shooter, tippy-toe threes. We need a point guard. We need a backup point guard. We need someone to move the ball, Jason Williams. We need what we're talking about here, sort of a 3-4 defender lockdown type, James Posey. And Pat Riley took everything he had. Him and Andy went in the garage and they shoveled up every asset they could, including a beloved player in Eddie Jones. And they went out. And I think we shouldn't overlook that kind of move. is there and I know these are hard, and when people pitch them to you, Clay, you summarily might dismiss them when we talk about, can they make a 4-for-3, a 5-for-4 trade? And you go, come on, people, it's a salary cap. There's so many moving parts there. This is the offseason when that kind of move might be the move instead. Instead of getting a Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, you address multiple holes, just like that trade did. They got Antoine Walker as a scorer. They got the ball handler in Jason Williams. They got the defender in James Posey. So one, would he be willing to put Kyle Lowry into a deal like that? Because I think Jimmy, as much as he loves his friends, loves winning more. Yes. And Jimmy, who invented Tyler Tuesdays, all of a sudden, if he had to depart, get rid of Tyler, would deal with it if he was that much closer to a championship, because Jimmy loves winning more. So I think that's the kind of trade. And again, do not put me on the spot and go, well, who could they do that with? Because, then I'm running through and going to Sacramento's, and I'm saying, couldn't you do a Rashawn Holmes and a De'Aaron Fox and a package like that where you go, Holmes works for the power rotation. De'Aaron Fox gives you that score and gives you that Tyler Hero replacement value. Maybe Dante DiVincenzo is a sign and trade on a free agent. So I think instead of thinking singular mega trade, maybe we should think of it this way, almost for those listening horizontally, as just expanding the package to where you say, wow, Pat didn't get a superstar, a whale. But man, when he cast that net, he came up with a lot of really attractive halibut. Maybe we're looking in that direction instead.
Well, no, and I think you're right. And so this kind of goes with some of the questions that we're asking. I want to get to one because somebody asked about Bradley Beal. I think it may have been Cedola. Here's the thing with Bradley Beal. I had a date night with my wife last night. Nice. We look up, the Washington Mystics game is on, and there's Bradley Beal front row wearing a Washington Mystics jersey. And that's awesome, man. That's cool to see these players out there supporting the WNBA. And yet it gets back to the thing we've said and heard about Bradley Beal for a long time. This man's a potential impending free agent. He can opt out. And yet he's out there at a Washington Mystics game. He's not showing any sort of inclination that he wants out of Washington. Now, if he does, that changes the compass. But I think you contrast that with what you've seen from Donovan Mitchell in the last couple of weeks, which is, I don't know, like the Quinn Snyder thing. I always wanted it. Like, part of the reason I signed my rookie extension was because I wanted Quinn Snyder to be my coach, which, by the way, I don't buy for a second, because this gets us back to what you asked me before the break about Tyler Hero. Ira, I'm going to answer your question with a question. When was the last time that you heard of any first-year player turning down that extension? Any player on a rookie contract turning down that first extension? Can you remember it?
No, it always goes the other way. It always goes the team taking the risk of allowing a player to go to restricted free agency. We've seen that across the NBA landscape lately, where a team will take that chance and let I'm losing the Sun Center,
DeAndre
Ayton, whatever, and taking that chance, and now he becomes a restricted free agent. We've seen that before. But no, and a matter of fact, this dovetails to what you said about Bradley Beal. I think among the reasons Bradley Beal is offering his love for Washington and his love for the Mystics and his love for DC and all that is this. Washington also, if Bradley Beal opts out, can offer him $250 million on a new contract to stay also. So I think Bradley Beal, for as much as he might want to win, there's still plenty of players who go, $250 million, even with inflation, that seems pretty good also. So I think that he might be wed. He could say he's wed to the franchise, but I think he could also be wed to the contract, because the contract will always be there. If you go somewhere else, you still can get traded and wind up not at the destination that you ultimately prioritize over the money anyway. That's where it seems like it's trending right now with Bradley Beal. But I do think Tyler Hero, this goes back to what we spoke about in our first segment today on the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show, is this. I do think Tyler Hero at least can preemptively put out there that if I am traded, I am not guaranteeing that I'm going to sign with the new team. Now, does that mean he's not going to take an extension? Probably not. Probably 95% that he's not going to do that, or you would go closer to 99%, Clay, and I agree with that. But he does have a card that he can play. All of this, threatening for a trade, forcing your way out, not accepting a trade, it's all a matter of, do you have a card you can put into play? That's all I'm saying is certain players have that they can put into play. If Bradley Beal goes back into his 1-year deal and picks up the final year of his contract and Washington goes, great, now we can trade him. Bradley Beal can go, I'm a free agent next summer, team. Don't take your chances trading for me unless I can go to team A, B, or C.
Mm-hmm.
He has that he could put into play. That's a little bit of the difference. Tyler has that he could put into play. Well, if I'm traded, I ain't signing no rookie scale extension and I'm out of here next July. Other team, well, we don't believe you, but we sure as hell can't be caught in that position, in that situation. That's sort of what James Harden is right now with the Sixers. The Sixers are in a terrible spot of having to offer James Harden like almost $500 million. But if they don't and they get nothing out of that trade, even though James Harden ain't turning down that money, James Harden ain't turning down no money. He always gets his money and where he wants to get to also. But Tyler does have a little bit of a card he could put into play, even if it's only a threat. So at least he has that card he could put there and maybe drive off and maybe get a little bit more where he wants. But to sort of sum this all up also, if there's not a trade this offseason for the Heat with Tyler Hero, and maybe like we spoke about at the top of the show, running it back where you said, hey, all these other teams were injured also, so don't overstate the Heat being within 1 3-pointer of going to the NBA Finals. And I get that also. I'm not so sure the Heat will have another chip next summer to put into play. You'll have Kyle Lowry maybe going to the final year of his contract, but a lot of money for a player who's going to be turning 38. You have Bam Adebayo, who I still think will remain a cornerstone. Jimmy Butler, who will remain a cornerstone. And you won't have this promising young player. There is no one else in the pipeline. There have been no first-round draft choices since Tyler Hero because you played one of your chips already last summer with Precious Achiuwa. So what I'm saying is, and I agree with you and Big O, and it kills me to do that, is that this really is a summer because this is when you have a chance to have a chip to put into play. If you bypass that and Tyler gets into that 5-year extension, it becomes a hell of a lot harder to wind up trading a player in that situation also. So I do agree that critical mass time is here, maybe not only for this offseason, Clay, but maybe even for a couple of years going forward.
No, we're up against it, so I want to talk about this
Always.
more after the break. But here's the other thing. I think the Heat saw this as this year played out. There's a real benefit to trading high as opposed to trading low. With Tyler Hero right now, you would be trading a lot higher than you did last offseason relative to what we saw in his performance last year versus this year. All right, so I want to get into the one name that Ira mentioned last week that I think would be perfect for this team, plus a trade idea that somebody just mentioned in the chat that I love, and I want to get your take on next, Ira.
Sounds good.